Bret Swanson is the president of Zionsville-based Entropy Economics. A native Hoosier from LaPorte, his career has touched politics, technology, and policy development. He's bullish on Indiana's future, but Bret Swanson says the state needs to think big to create the workforce and the economy it wants, and believes entrepreneurs and startups are keys to making it happen. He's my guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast. And I am pleased to be joined on the podcast this week by Bret Swanson. Bret is the president of Entropy Economics, a Zionsville-based technology research firm. Serves in a number of roles, including as chair of the Indiana Public Retirement System as well. And Bret, you're a busy guy. I appreciate you taking the time.
Gary, wonderful to be with you. Really appreciate it.
Hey, want to get into a number of things, in particular, your work as it relates to the future of the Indiana economy, the future of workforce, and some of the work you're doing with the Sagamore Institute. But first, a little bit about you, Bret. Talk about, as I mentioned, you have Entropy Economics, a Zionsville-based company, began your career as an aide to Senator Lugar, also spent some time as an analyst with former Congressman the late Jack Kemp. Talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was born in LaPorte, Indiana, northern Indiana. My parents,
home of the Slicers, right?
That's absolutely, orange and black. My parents still live there. Was out on the East Coast for about 10 or 15 years. My wife, Kate, and I moved back here, almost 20 years ago now, to Zionsville, and have loved it. Over that period, I've really focused on technology, the internet, the digital economy, although I branched out from here and there and do research and write about a number of different things, whether it's China or biotech or energy. I'm really focusing on the intersection of tech and energy right now. And so I do research for institutional investors, for technology companies, and then I also have a sort of a heavy load of public policy research related to tech and the economy. And so lucky to do that from here in Zionsville. And now, even though a lot of my work over the last 25 years is focused on national and global issues and continues to do so, I'm really lucky now that I'm getting to do a little bit more Indiana-specific work.
As you look, Bret, you talk about your work in the digital economy, technology. How would you assess Indiana's position in that world? There's been a lot of talk over the last, I guess it's been 25 or 30 years about Indiana trying to, create that kind of forward-looking, forward-leaning economy. Where does Indiana stand, in your view, in the digital age?
I think we're doing a lot better. I think there have been some, important milestones over the last decade or two, successful companies in the digital space that then breed more startups, attract more capital. So I think we're doing better. I think we're still, if you gauge it honestly, we're still sort of middle of the pack if you look across the country. And I think we just need to leverage and, double or triple down in this arena across the, technological fields, and especially in entrepreneurship and startups, because I think over the long term, that really is the key determinant of growth and prosperity for any economy, is sort of whether you have, a network of high growth entrepreneurial ventures, whether they're startups or whether they're established firms that are really growing fast in the sort of key industries. And so I think we've got a great foundation. I think Indiana is a well-governed state. We've got a lot of good people, a lot of smart people. I just think we need to sort of, set our sights, even higher, especially in these potentially high growth areas.
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that, because you really do believe that rate of entrepreneurship, that support of innovation and entrepreneurship is critical. Indiana, and I think rightfully so, getting a lot of attention for some of these really big economic development deals they're landing. But I know you're of the opinion that entrepreneurship piece, that creating startups and having those startups grow into, bigger entities is going to be crucial going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's great news what's happening, what Purdue's Mung Chiang likes to call the hard tech corridor with the new chips plant coming in. I think that's fantastic. You see some new data center investments from Amazon and Meta. I think those are terrific. I think those can be, again, a foundation of us sort of riding the wave of this huge, boom, call it the AI boom, where, say, the last 25 to 30 years was sort of the internet boom, broadband, the web apps, which was mobile, which is fantastic. Now I think the next 20 years is sort of going to be the AI boom, and that'll require these, advanced chips, advanced data centers. That's great. But I think what we need to do now is really leverage these pieces that we're bringing together and to build entrepreneurial ecosystems around these things, because these types of new investments, new industries will help attract talent. They'll help attract capital. We should be able to build now lots of other companies around some of these sort of foundational investments in companies and sort of keep that, build a flywheel that can sort of keep this going. And so I don't think you can ever sort of build an entire economy on just, a couple big announcements, as important as they are. I think you need to leverage them to take it to the next step.
Bret, as you look at AI and you look at some of these announcements, SK Hynix in West Lafayette at Purdue, the Amazon, Google, Meta data centers, Secretary of Commerce Rosenberg has talked about those pieces being connected and how Indiana can become kind of this future hub for AI in some degree. As you look at that, is that something you see as a possibility that Indiana can be kind of a leader in that the AI space?
Yeah, we're certainly off to I think a good start, and I agree that we can be, but it takes a lot of work. I mean, the whole world is now trying to participate in this just, once in a generation boom. The amount of investment happening is huge, and we've gotten those first few pieces early on, which I think is great. But, now we need to branch out into not just the infrastructure, which is super important, and we should keep pursuing that, but then all the other applications and software and other types of service businesses that can be based upon the AI platform, which is even much bigger than the AI infrastructure pieces themselves. And so now we need to push into those things, because those will be, multi-trillion-dollar industries. And so that's why I keep coming back to sort of emphasizing the entrepreneurship piece, which requires bold, people, trying to take, creating new big ideas, taking creative risks, attracting people. It requires us to sort of try to figure out ways to step up our capital investment game. So we've got some really great venture firms around. We need to now build the piece sort of the growth capital phase that's a little bit above the venture phase, so that if we get startups that are successful, then we can scale those startups to be something even bigger. And then, as this all happens, ideally it can help you both attract world-class talent from anywhere. It can make sure that all the great young students that we train here have potentially a place to go. Not that we want to necessarily keep them here. If they go and learn somewhere else, we can maybe get them back someplace. So we want to train people, but we also want to have this growing, vibrant economy that can attract talent, because in addition to the pieces of education and workforce training, you've also got to be able to attract talent from anywhere.
You are, as you look at the economy of the future in Indiana and workforce, you're involved very directly with a major initiative at the Indianapolis-based Sagamore Institute, Workforce 2040, which really can serve, I think, as kind of a template, if you will, for the future of workforce and the economy going forward here. Talk about that work, the Sagamore Institute, Midwest-based think tank, kind of a successor to the Hudson Institute, and they had done, I guess it was it Workforce 2000?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, gosh, it's
And
amazing
2020.
to think about that in 2020. So these are successor pieces to that. But talk about the work of Workforce 2040, what it's all about, and why, in your view, it's critical.
Sure. So this is the third iteration. Like you said, the Hudson Institute originally did a study back in the 80s on Workforce 2000. Then they repeated it 20 years later for 2020, and now we're doing it for 2040. And, the world's a different place now. I think they had a lot of good insights then. Now we're dealing with a bunch of trends. We've already talked a lot about AI, which will probably change and disrupt in all sorts of industries and tasks and jobs. So that's one of our big themes, but we're looking at, the sort of work from anywhere trends. We're looking at a potential manufacturing renaissance as a sort of bipartisan skepticism of China. It has a lot of people thinking that we're going to do a lot more domestic manufacturing. What does that mean? We're looking at, there are really three buckets to this Workforce 2040 project: formal, K through 12, higher ed, lifelong learning. The second bucket is sort of the future of the workforce. So that has to do with demographics. What skills do we have? What skills do we need? What people do we have? What people, how many people are we looking to have in the coming decades? And then the third bucket that I'm really focused most on myself is a sort of future of the economy, which includes things like tech and big shifts in the global economy and how that might affect us, but more to the point, how we can actually get ahead of and exploit these opportunities. And so over the next several months, leading up to the September rollout, we're going to be doing research in all these areas and really, soliciting ideas from across the state and trying to build a network so that we don't think we have all the answers, but we're doing a lot of analysis. We're going to come out with some policy recommendations. Some of them may be specific, some of them may be broad, strategic. And we hope that it's something useful that leaders in business and policymakers and nonprofits and people everywhere around the state can look to and at least help them get them thinking about how we build successful companies and institutions that can provide opportunities to the workforce over the next 5, 10, 20 years.
As you look at it, it seems to me that, no matter when it is, maybe it was back in 2000 and again in 2020, the narrative would be, the economy is changing. This is an important time for the economy. And I certainly think you can make that case today. But I think even more so maybe is that some of the things we talked about with the kinds of, traditional manufacturing state like Indiana, these industries that are now being attracted to the state and growing in Indiana are very different way of doing things, more of a knowledge-based kind of thing. Do you think that how would you assess kind of this point in the Indiana economy, and again, the work on Workforce 2040, why it's perhaps especially important now as we're entering this particular point in time in the economy?
Even though there are some exciting things happening, and as we've just talked about, and I think there's more to come. If we realistically assess the Indiana economy right now, the sort of tough times for manufacturing over the last 30 to 40 years, which really accelerated with the move to, Southeast Asia, did sort of, take away one of the core strengths of Indiana. And I don't know that we've fully replaced that with sort of what the next, economy and jobs of the future are. So if you look at a great analysis by a guy named Phil Powell down at Indiana University, an economist, he's done some really good work analyzing in detail what types of jobs and industries Indiana has right now. Too many of our jobs are concentrated in what you'd call low-wage sectors. And if you look at the Indianapolis metro area, we've got the highest paid jobs are physicians and health educators and a few in financial services. But we really lag in a lot of the tech industries, a lot of the financial industries, and other sort of high-wage sectors. So we really need to focus on that. Fortunately, I guess you'd have to say, is that because we are at this turning point, I think, in the economy, as you mentioned, with the fact that people can work from anywhere, people can start businesses with just a few people, with relatively little capital with this new AI wave, which I think will sort of disrupt in a good way hosts of industries and businesses. I think there's an opportunity for us to, sort of seize this, right? With some big ideas, some big leadership, because companies, jobs all over the country and all over the world are going to be rapidly changing. So we should look at this as an opportunity, even though, it's going to be challenging for a lot of our own companies. I do think that we're sort of at a point where we'll look back today, and decisions that Indiana makes today will really, really matter, whether we sort of, coast along as sort of a, middle tier state that does pretty well, whether we're kind of left behind by these waves, or whether we sort of really ride these waves. And I think there's a possibility for any three of those cases.
Much more ahead with Bret Swanson on the future of the Indiana economy, including take a look at Bret thinks there's some trends that we need to keep an eye on here in Indiana as we look at the future of the Indiana workforce. That's when the Business and Beyond podcast returns. Stay with us.
At PNC Bank, we're committed to making a difference in the lives of our customers and communities by helping them move forward financially. As a Main Street bank, we try to do right by our customers with every encounter. Our local teams offer personalized financial advice to help guide you in making the best decision. We're proud to be part of your community. PNC Bank. See how we can make a difference for you at pnc.com. Copyright 2022, the PNC Financial Services Group, Inc., all rights reserved.
And welcome back to the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. My guest this week is Bret Swanson. He's the president of Entropy Economics, a Zionsville-based technology research firm, also very plugged into all things technology, the digital age, future of the Indiana economy. You've got your hands in a lot of pots there, Bret, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us. And what I thought we'd do in the second half of the podcast is look at, in your view, some of the trends as we look at the Indiana economy, the workforce of the future that you see as being out there. One of them certainly is AI, artificial intelligence. And, you mentioned earlier the positive disruption that AI can bring. A lot of attention, a lot of focus has been on the negative side of things, but you feel this can be, really a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I, would tilt towards the optimistic case. I just think the opportunities for literally trillion-dollar, companies and multi-trillion-dollar industries over the next 5, 10, 20 years are virtually unlimited, because it can be this. It's a general purpose technology that can be plugged in to every other industry, whether it's education, healthcare, manufacturing, biopharmaceutical research. All sorts of mundane tasks in all of our businesses and organizations can be transformed by this. Having said that, we shouldn't, dismiss this disruptions that will happen. So any transformation this big is going to have disruptions on individual tasks, individual jobs, individual companies. There are many tasks, jobs, and companies probably will go away over the next several years. And so while we're taking advantage of the huge opportunities, we've got to, I think, get ahead of the curve in sort of, workforce retraining, workforce education, what I call, instead of, we've had continuing education for a long time. Now we may need what I call continuous education, right? So even as people are on the job, their employers provide continuous education, often through AI apps themselves that are constantly teaching them new skills, new tasks, so that they don't become obsolescent. So we sort of stay on that edge and not fall behind. I think we're going to have to, build this into our K through 12 and higher ed educational platforms. I think, we really need to rethink the educational platforms, which in many ways now are, more than 100 years old, the basics. And how do we, from the very earliest ages, prepare students for this new world? I think you can say, let me give you an analogy here of why I think we need to get ahead of this curve. And even for optimists like me, we shouldn't dismiss the possible downsides. So if you look at, say, 30 or 40 years ago, on the leading edge of globalization, even for free traders like me who thought that overall it would generate more wealth across the world, and I think it certainly did, right? The rise of China, India, Southeast Asia in general brought billions of people out of poverty. It allowed us to, design the iPhone here, produce it in China, created lots of wealth. But we've got to acknowledge that those forces did have disparate negative impacts on concentrated industries and people and firms and towns. For example, some of the manufacturing intensive towns in Indiana and across the Midwest. And I think a lot of us free traders who think that overall it was probably a good thing have to acknowledge that we probably didn't prepare our workforces and our communities well enough for that massive change. And so even now, as I promote sort of the opportunities of AI, I think we also have to acknowledge and get ahead of the curve on some of the disruptions that will happen and better prepare our people and communities for what's going to happen.
Another trend you see is the renaissance in manufacturing. And as you look at a state like Indiana, obviously the most manufacturing intensive state, I think, in the country. So obviously implications here, the reshoring of manufacturing. What are the opportunities in your view for Indiana with this manufacturing renaissance?
Well, I think we're off to a good start with, for example, the big chip plant. I think, we can't think of it as bringing back the old manufacturing, the goods that we made 30, 40, 50 years ago. That probably is not going to happen. We don't necessarily want that to happen. We want to take advantage of this new opportunity in domestic manufacturing to build the products of the future. So, and to build them with robots and with AI. And it's true that some of these manufacturing industries may not employ as many people per unit of output generated. So we're not going to have plants with, 5 or 10,000 people in them necessarily, because we may be doing more with robotics and AI and so forth. But the manufacturing jobs that it does generate probably will be much, much higher wage, right? You give people more capital, better tools, and the workers can make a lot more money. And so we need to think of sort of, the manufacturing renaissance as a futuristic manufacturing. And not every plant will have as many people working in it necessarily, but maybe we just want more manufacturing firms. So that's the way I would think about it. And, how can we sort of exploit what was a historical strength to, to do manufacturing 2.0? That's the way I would sort of think about it.
Another trend, remote work. It's certainly changing the face of a number of industries and workforce and the way we do work. As you look at the fact that many people can work from essentially anywhere, what kind of an impact do you see that trend having here in Indiana in particular?
Yeah, it paradoxically sort of makes where you live and work less important and potentially more important at the same time. So if you're not stuck to an employer physical headquarters or even a remote or a secondary location, you can work from anywhere. That's great. It gives people and employers a lot more flexibility, but it also sort of makes where you live more of a choice because you don't just have to go to wherever the job is. And so if I've got my optimist hat on, I would say that Indiana, the fact that I think it's a pretty nice place to live, it's got lots of nice communities, lots of nice people, it's relatively affordable. I think if we lean into that, we can take advantage of this work from anywhere model. And we should be thinking in all our communities as we build them, housing affordability, quality of education, safety, community amenities. How can we build on what I think are already some pretty good strengths so that more people want to live in Indiana and work from anywhere? It also means that if we get creative and entrepreneurial about it, we can exploit talent wherever it is throughout the world. So we should also be thinking about that as companies here. So, I think we've got some pretty good advantages. We've been slightly increasing our population over the last number of years, increasing investment, even as some of our Midwestern neighbors have been losing population. So I think we can build on that trend, but it's not going to be easy because these trends that we've seen over the last, 30, 40 years of people moving to the Sun Belt, moving to the West, are also probably going to continue with this remote work trend. And so we've got to work, harder than ever to leverage our advantages.
And that ties in perhaps with maybe that last trend I want you to talk about, and that's the value of place. A lot of talk about quality of place, quality of life, and you can look all over the state of Indiana and see how communities, large and small, are investing in quality of life projects to make their communities attractive to keep people, but also attract them there. The regional economic development grants that Indiana has launched and have been wildly successful around the state, really focused on those kinds of things. How important, in your view, going forward, are these quality of life projects and amenities in communities?
Yeah, I think more important than ever for the reasons we just talked about. People have more choices. There's more flexibility. And so those, what used to be secondary sort of considerations, now maybe become primary. If I can choose anywhere in the world to raise a family, to educate a family, to, enjoy community, then that means that, education, housing affordability, safe, fun, enjoyable, entertaining communities are going to, with vibrant professional associations, are going to be more important than ever. And, I think historically, if you look at Indiana, speaking as a native Hoosier, I think that's something that we can capitalize on. I think we've got a lot of nice places to live. And as other places, perhaps the last couple of years have demonstrated, there have been some states that have lost some people because maybe they haven't prioritized that, and we can take advantage of that.
Kind of put a bow on the conversation here. Are you bullish about the future here in Indiana as you look at the future of the Indiana economy and some of these workforce issues we're talking about? What's your take on what's ahead for Indiana?
I am bullish. I would say a long-term optimist. I think we've got a good foundation. We've had good governance in Indiana. We've got a lot of smart people that are all, pushing in the right direction. I would just say that while I'm bullish, we can't, we need to view the challenges that are coming, that are here and that are coming realistically, and that we need to sort of all pull together, step up our game, get really creative about policy, about leadership, about education, about workforce training. And then that last piece that I think is still the most important. Are we going to have enough bold entrepreneurs that can sort of take the reins and deliver that bullish future?
Bret Swanson, it's been a real treat to have you on the podcast this week. Thanks for all you do for Indiana, and we'll be looking forward to the work of you and others at the Sagamore Institute on that report, Workforce 2040. And you mentioned it earlier. Is it this fall going to come out? The work come out this fall?
That's correct. We'll have content coming out along the way, but planning for a September launch.
Very good. Looking forward to that very much. Bret Swanson, my guest this week on the Business and Beyond podcast presented by PNC. It's a weekly conversation with achievers in business, sports, entertainment, and beyond. And you can download all of our episodes and get Indiana business news 24/7. All you have to do is go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com. I'm Gary Dick. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.